So welcome back to the many of you who have been coming all along or have made it to many of these, and welcome to those of you who are new to the conference. We're really excited about what we have planned for the next day and a half, and we're extremely excited about our topic. We had a really great time over the last, week or so putting together the images that you have been seeing in the background all morning. And that is the work, by the way, of our fantastic planning team. So all of you probably have had some interaction with Ethi Almaty. Where's Ethi? She's outside, working, of course. Anyway, there she is. Thank you, Ethi. So Ethi, Liz Johnson. Where's Liz? There. This is Liz's fourth time with us on the planning team, and her last, since she is going to be going off to graduate school somewhere. We hope here, but we don't know yet. That's going to be her choice. Lauren Moran, she was also outside. And of course, Colleen Ammerman, who's been with us from the very beginning. So let's just have a round of applause. Because they are really the people who really make this happen and pull it off. Okay, so let me just give you a little bit of background here. I want to reiterate a little bit about what we said in our invitation to you, and give you a bit of background on our theme, the courage of our convictions, which, as we said in the invitation, aims to unpack the beliefs and actions that define, unite, and separate us so that we might more effectively engage in the project of advancing structural equality in the workplace and beyond. So let me just say a little bit about the origins of this year's theme. I mean, I think it's obvious that it's super pertinent to what's happening on the political scene, even in the US and around the world. But I'd like to just say a little bit about specifically how it evolved. So it was initially inspired by the topic of actually our second panel today, which is the panel after lunch, this is Jen Berdahl, Peter Glick, and Marianne Cooper, who are all here somewhere, where we're going to present a case of a kind. It's a dilemma that we faced late last summer when we were informed of allegations that a colleague had sexually harassed a doctoral student. So we're going to tell you all about that later. But the piece that's relevant here really centers on the disagreements that we had among us about what we should do, if anything, what action might we take in relation to this colleague. And so, here we were, all feminists. We'd all known each other for, a pretty long time. I think we all think very highly of each other, very much respect each other, and yet, we were having a difficult time because we had different points of view about that. And so we decided, given our differences, that what we'd like to do is to bring that dilemma, which we thought was probably experienced in many different ways by many of the people, who will be in this room. We decided to bring that dilemma into a public forum, and I think it was Jen's idea to bring it into this conference. So we thought that was a great idea, and I ran it by my team, and I thought that was a good idea. And so I was kind of mulling that over, and I woke up one morning right around then, and this phrase, the courage of our convictions, just kind of entered into my mind. And so I Googled it, of course. And what I found, actually to my surprise, is that it had there was no one, kind of source for the phrase, and it had many different connotations. And so, I talked a little bit about this in our invitation to you, but two of them really captured my attention, and actually they're both by Nietzsche. And the first is along the lines of kind of what I had in mind when the phrase first came to me. And so he wrote, a very popular error, having the courage of one's convictions. Rather, it's a matter of having the courage for an attack on one's convictions. So it was very much the theme of, one's convictions being something not only to have the courage to express, but also to have the courage to defend against attack. But then I also found a quote in which he said, "Convictions are more dangerous foes of truth than lies." And so taken together, it seemed to be urging us to courageously embrace our convictions, but also remaining open to learning and open to inquiry and to doubt when our convictions are questioned. So I thought, okay, all well and good when it's like a group like the four of us, where we are basically like-minded people and we respect each other, but we just happen to disagree. So what about when the convictions of others are hostile to what we hold dear? They want to destroy it. They're vengeful or hateful. What do we think about urging those people to have the courage of their convictions? And so that question really informed how we thought about putting the program together for this year's conference. And that's the kind of thinking that informed this whole collection of images that we've been showing up on these screens all morning, where we're juxtaposing, I'm sure you've noticed, the likes of high school students and others protesting for gun control or against racism, or Christine Blasey Ford coming forward in her testimony in the Kavanaugh hearings, and so on. All these amazing people, on the one hand, juxtaposed with the likes of those who are participating in the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville. So that's one of the images up there. So people whose views, I think, really couldn't be more hostile, I think I probably speak for everybody in this room, to the values and the convictions that we hold dear. So, aren't all these images of people having the courage of their convictions? So I thought, well, there's no question that they have convictions. But I thought, is it courage? Is that, do we share that as well? And so I thought about the definition of courage, and for that I turned to Brené Brown. And what she reminds us is that the root of the word courage is cor, the Latin word for heart. In one of its earliest forms, she notes, the word courage meant to speak one's mind by telling all one's heart, to speak honestly and openly about who we are and about our experiences, good and bad. It's about putting our vulnerability on the line. So I thought, wow, are all these people in these images, all of them, are they all speaking from their heart? Because I actually see the kind of the Unite the Right rallyists, and what I see is fear. And I think it's fear turned into anger and hatred. And so then I'm kind of stumped, because don't those emotions come from the heart? Are they the consequences of the heart shutting down? And so we were talking about this last night at the reception. I'll just kind of leave that with you to think about. I don't have an answer to that. I was stumped. But anyway, with that as background, let me pose again the questions that we're inviting you to consider over this next day and a half. Who gets to speak? About what? To whom? And with what consequences? And as we noted in our invitation, these questions demand that we consider the relationship between position-taking and identity, the costs and benefits of difficult conversations, and changing notions about the role of research and researchers in contemporary social, political, and ethical debates. So it's our hope in this next day and a half with you, as we consider these questions and hear the views and research of our presenters and of each other, that we will foster a wide-ranging, sophisticated, and indeed courageous conversation. So I'm going to turn it over now to Lakshmi. She's going to say a few more words about our theme and then introduce our first speaker. Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you all very much for being here. So I just wanted to echo a couple of things that Robin said and my sort of idea about what I hope our conversation over the next couple of days will look like. So the first is a quote that Larry Bacow actually said in his inaugural address, that the search for truth requires courage. And if you think about who we are as scholars in this room, I always start with identity. So one common shared identity, scholars in this room, what does it take then to have the courage to examine our convictions, as Robin said, and then also to encourage others to examine their convictions in order to come to some kind of truth. And truth, obviously, as a very complex construct where it can be about shared truth, personal truth, truth as facts. All of these are up for debate, hopefully over the next couple of days. The second thought that came to mind as we were thinking about this whole setup for the conference is, of course, the question of silence and voice. And another one of my wonderful mentors, and also the person who was co-leading last year's conference, David Thomas, I remember when I was talking with him, we were teaching authentic leadership last year, 2 years ago, and he said, well, the question really is, are you being silent or are you being silenced? And I do think a question for us, depending on, after identity, I guess the question is power. When the powerful remain silent, is that condoning what's out in the world? Or is that allowing people space for doubt and expression and voice? And then the third quote I'll leave you on is Martin Luther King. And Colleen reminded us this morning that today is the day of the assassination of King. And he left us with this very powerful quote if we think about the courage of our convictions as a way to try to change the status quo, which I think we're all engaged in here as a community. We must accept finite disappointment, but must never lose infinite hope. So what does that mean as we're all engaged in this collective discussion for truth, engaging with doubt in order to change the status quo? How do we keep that going? And my hope for all of us as we go through the day is that we're going to start with Soraya, who I'll introduce in a moment, with this notion of anger and rage, all of the stuff that's packed in. But hopefully then with Robin's panel and with some of the conversation that we're going to have with the panel after Soraya, talk, conversation, interpersonal communication. And then tomorrow with Dolly and Kira, and also our evening program, and with Mara, the idea of ending on voice, and as King reminds us, hope. So that's my hope for all of us today. And I'm very excited, actually, to introduce Soraya Shamali. She, as you all know, is a prolific speaker, writer, advocate for women's freedom of expression. And the title of the book, Rage Becomes Her, I mean, how amazing is that? How often do we get told that? And, despite living in a society and a community that's constantly, in some respects, belittling rage and belittling anger and diminishing people who express that, using anger as a political tool and a catalyst for social change, which, as Robin said, I mean, is the anger coming from fear? Or is the anger coming from that sense of righteous indignation and injustice? And anger as this proactive sort of launch of yourself against the world. And so I really hope that we're gonna start off on this note of parceling all of that up and throwing the rage out into the world in order to create a more positive difference. So, Soraya?